A very good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, whatever place it is you're tuned on to the Life Signatures Radio. It's good to be here. It's yet another opportunity, yet another day for us to churn out another episode on the podcast. It is a daily show that is focusing on the subjects of purpose, productivity, and resilience. We come over here to teach, to inspire, to motivate. It's a virtual incubator for those three things. If you've not been following us and maybe it's your first time you've tuned on to the show, this is a series I've been doing over 30 episodes right now, talking about the subject of raising spirit-led children. And I've been looking at 6 or so ways in which you can do that. Today we are continuing to look at the 7th, which we started talking about a couple of days back. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Life Signatures podcast with Lawrence Namale. Lawrence is a life coach, author, and keynote speaker who loves to tackle different topics on purpose, productivity, and resilience. His mission in life is to awaken all your boundless possibilities available in you. Life Signatures podcast is dedicated to bring to reality every single person who knows that deep down in their gut, there's got to be more to life than this. And now, here is your host, Lawrence Namale.
Well, even as we are doing this, let's just do a recap for you so that you can get to be at par with where we have come from. Number one, you are not raising a spirit-led child. Let me just do it in a positive way. In order to raise a spirit-led child, number one, teach them to cherish their inner compass. Number two, teach them the importance of self-extraction. Number three, teach them to nurture and nourish their creative capacities. Number four, teach them the value of personal growth and personal development. And number five, teach them to be humane. Number six, speak into their spirit. And then number 7, which we've been talking about and going to continue talking about, teach them to create value and solutions. This is core. Spirit is about creation. Spirit is about bringing forth. In fact, spirit sometimes is about the new. It's about being so attuned to the new and not necessarily dwelling on the past, dwelling on what you've already known, not being faithful to what is already been experienced, but being faithful to an adventure of creation, an adventure of newness, an adventure of bringing forth things. The importance of a newborn baby is not to conform into what is already there. The importance of a newborn baby is to bring newness, and those things that are new are locked into their spirit. So we were saying that if you're going to teach them to create value and to create solutions, number one, we ought to nurture the spirit of creation and creativity in them. And we talked about this yesterday. I don't want to go back there. We say that you cannot think that the only people who are creative are a few individuals who are artists and musicians and footballers and so on. No, everyone has a hint, an element of creativity within their own sector, niche, within their own whatever predisposition. Each and every one of us has an element of creation, and that's what we need to we ought to nurture. We ought to nurture that creativity in all of us. Don't look at someone and say this one is not creative. No, not just because they cannot draw doesn't mean they're not creative. They can be able to take care of a child or a kid, but in a creative way, not in a normal way. They can be able to cook, but in a creative way. They can be able to do accounting, books of accounting, but in a creative way. We read the story of this brain surgeon who was, what was his name? He is his name, but Ben Carson. Ben Carson invented one of the ways of doing brain surgery. It wasn't scripted. Where did it come from? It came from the Spirit. That's what we need to nurture, regardless of who someone is. But then number 2, let us talk about this today, and then we call it a day. If we are going to teach these people to create value and to be solution providers, we ought to let them experiment. I know this is not going to sound well. We grew up in a very rigid society where everything had to be in the same place that they left. You cannot touch a knob of a radio unless you're an adult. You cannot touch the knob of a television set, and then maybe even the television set was not there, unless you're an adult. Things were supposed, obedient children and so-called obedient children and so-called disciplined children were those ones who did not touch things. But I'm telling you this, if you're going to nurture someone who is going to create value and solutions, you need to allow them to experiment with the unseen instead of accepting the seen, the known, and the generally accepted. My wife told me a story of a friend of hers whose child was very, wanton, for lack of a better word. If you go to their home with a watch or something or an electronic something and you left it lying there unattended, the guy will just take it up and split it and start examining what is inside of it. Now that's experimentation, which is very expensive. And now, a parent who hasn't understood the workings of the Spirit, a parent who is not alert, will label this kid to be indisciplined. Of course, there is an element of wanting to respect other people's property. But why would they be interested in splitting some electronics to find out what's in there? Why would they want to do that? It is Spirit. What we need to do, and that's exactly what my wife did. It was very wise of her to do this. She said, maybe, she didn't even say maybe, she said, take this guy to an electronics person to be an apprentice with them. Because obviously they're into electronics. You get what I'm saying? That's the kind of alertness that we need to have in our lives, even as we're raising these people. If you see an interest in them, even if it's expensive on us, we need to lean into it, find a way, and I'm going to talk about leaning into those things in the episodes that are going to follow. It is easy to be fixated about how things work, about how things have been. The way they were for my grandmama, that's the way they were for me. And that's the way they are going to be for you. It is not wise to be fixated that way if we're trying to raise a Spirit-led someone. Because Spirit is not something that you can box. Spirit is not something that you can predict and put in a box. And it's not even in the past. It's not historical. Spirit is never historical. That's why we've got to allow people to try new things, experiment with new things, new ideas. I'm going to talk about those. The only things that we should emphasize to our children in teaching them to be, faithful with them, this should be the hard, unchanging facts and principles. And there are not so many principles of life. Those are the things that, should be unchanging. But when there is fluidity in the environment, allowing us to be creators, allowing us to solve problems, you cannot just be fixated in a way that this is how. Remember that story of a frying pan? Someone who, not really a frying pan, it's the story of a fish. Someone, the third generation realized that every time they get fish, it is cut into I don't know how many pieces before it's fried. And so they asked the mama, why did you do that? Why do you do that? And the mama said, that's how my mama used to do it. And luckily the grandmother was alive. They asked her, why do you always cut your fish? Why did you used to cut your fish when you're frying? And she said, I used to have smaller frying pans. If I had a big one, I will not cut it. I will not split it. And you see, that's the thing that we are looking at today, where we are doing things that were seen to be done previously without a question. We just do them because we saw. We don't question. It's like sheep. Have you ever seen sheep? If you put a barrier and the first sheep jumps over the barrier, and then you remove the barrier, the other sheep will keep jumping even if the barrier has already been removed. They just keep jumping and jumping and jumping, as in thoughtlessly. That's the problem. We should not be thoughtless in creating solutions. There's a time I was spreading margarine on bread, staying with my father. I'm spreading margarine on bread with a spoon. And he was mad, he was livid. He's like, we're supposed to be using a knife to do that. And I'm like, what's the point? The point is spreading margarine. He doesn't have to be using a particular piece of cutlery to spread the margarine. The end game is the margarine has been spread. The problem has been solved. It's a problem, you've solved the problem. I mean, who's going to come to your house and give you marks and say this piece of equipment is for this? In fact, by the way, there's no written record, no written directions that you should never spread margarine on bread using a spoon. I know. By the way, you go to restaurants and there are these spoons that are looking like this. This is for this, this is for this, this is this for this. Who said I can never solely use my hands? And you say, oh, that guy is uncouth and so on. What's the point? At the end of the day, food is going to go into my stomach. That's the point. Therefore, we should allow people to experiment and people to be creative with very many ways of solving problems. The only things we should emphasize should be the hard facts, hard principles that are unchanging. When it comes to processes, when it comes to methods and so on, let us allow people to explore. Let us allow these children to explore. For example, you cannot be fixated on a particular style of ironing cloth, that you want all your children to do exactly that. And that's how my father was training me. I mean, it was a mess. Just him observing you trying to iron. This is supposed to go like this. You're supposed to hold like this. Man, there is not a single way you can replicate of ironing. What is the end game? The end game is that creases are removed from the clothes. Period. That's it. Anyway, if the end result is a well-ironed cloth, let them use whatever method. So, number 2, what we're saying is that we ought to let them to experiment with the unseen, things that we haven't done ourselves. Right? Things we haven't done ourselves. There are parents who will beat up kids because they have tried to do something in a different way. That is being myopic to the core. Allow. Look at the end game. Look at the end game at the end of the day. Well, tomorrow we will continue talking about this, but until then, bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Life Signatures Radio. If you enjoyed today's show, subscribe to Life Signatures Radio on iTunes, Stitcher, or visit our website at lifesignatures.libsyn.com. Life Signatures Radio, fresh, clean, and inspiring.